The space station called Nexus Prime was the largest structure ever built by living beings. It floated in the darkness between three star systems, and inside its massive walls, representatives from over 40 different alien species gathered every year. They came to trade, to make deals, and to show off their power. This was the Galactic Assembly, and everyone who mattered in the known universe had a seat at its table. Everyone except the humans. Commander Daniel Hayes stood near the back of the Great Hall and watched the opening ceremony. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform with no medals or decorations. Beside him stood the rest of the human delegation. There were only 5 of them. Lieutenant Morgan was the youngest, barely 30 years old, with red hair pulled back in a tight bun. Next to her stood Dr. Samuel Price, their science officer, and 2 security guards named Victor and Ben. 5 humans. That was all Earth had sent to represent their entire species. The delegation, on the other hand, had brought over 200 representatives. They were massive reptilian creatures, each one standing over 8 feet tall with thick green scales and yellow eyes. Their leader, Ambassador Al, stood at the center of the hall and spoke to the gathered species. His voice was deep and carried easily across the room. "Another year of prosperity for the Assembly," Al said. "Another year of strength and progress. We welcome all who have proven their worth among the stars." His yellow eyes moved across the crowd and stopped on the small human group in the corner. A cruel smile spread across his face. "And we also welcome the humans," he said, "the smallest members of our great assembly. Tell me, Commander Hayes, how many ships did your species bring this year? 2, 3. Laughter filled the hall. The tall creatures with clicking mandibles made sounds of amusement. The squid-like beings in floating water tanks bubbled with mockery. Even species that had never spoken to humans joined in the laughter. Commander Hayes did not react. His face remained calm and still. "We brought 1 ship, Ambassador," he said quietly, "the same as last year." Al threw his head back and laughed louder than anyone. "1 ship, did you hear that? The mighty humans have come with 1 ship. He stepped closer to the human delegation and his massive shadow fell over them. "Tell me, Commander, why does the Assembly allow such a weak species to sit among us? You have no fleet. You have no conquered worlds. You have nothing but a small blue planet on the edge of nowhere." Morgan's hands curled into fists at her sides. Her jaw tightened, and she took a step forward. But before she could speak, Commander Hayes placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Not yet," he whispered, so quiet that only she could hear. Forced herself to relax, she stepped back and said nothing. Al noticed the exchange and grinned. "Even your own people want to fight, Commander, but they cannot, because humans are weak. You are quiet little creatures who hide in your corner and accept whatever scraps we give you." He turned to the crowd. "The silent vermin, I call them. They came to the stars 60 years ago, and in all that time they have done nothing, built nothing, conquered nothing." More laughter, more mockery. Commander Hayes simply nodded. "You are correct, Ambassador. We are very quiet." The ceremony continued, and the humans remained in their corner. They did not complain. They did not argue. They accepted the smallest quarters on the station, a tiny room meant for storage that had been hastily converted for their use. They accepted trade agreements that favored every other species. They accepted seats at the back of every meeting. For 3 days, the humans endured constant insults. They refused to trade with them directly, forcing them to work through intermediaries who took large cuts of every deal. They spread rumors that humans carried diseases dangerous to other species. A group of young soldiers blocked the hallway outside the human quarters one night and made threatening gestures until station security finally arrived. Through all of this, the humans remained polite. Dr. Samuel Price spent his time studying the technology on display at the station, taking careful notes but never asking questions that might seem too curious. Victor and Ben stood guard at their quarters, never responding to insults, never rising to provocations. Lieutenant Morgan attended every meeting she was allowed into, sitting quietly and listening to everything. And Commander Hayes watched. On the third night, Morgan finally broke her silence. They were alone in their small quarters, the door sealed and a privacy field active around the room. "How much longer do we have to take this?" she asked. Her voice was tight with frustration. "They spit on us. They mock us. That ambassador called us vermin to our faces and we just stood there." Commander Hayes sat at the small table in the center of the room. He was looking at reading through reports that could not see. "I know it's hard," he said without looking up. "It's supposed to be hard. But why? We have the power to make them respect us. We have the—" "Lieutenant," Hayes finally looked up. His eyes were calm but serious. "What do you think would happen if we showed them our strength right now? If we brought our real fleet to this station and demanded respect? Thought about it, they would fear us." "Yes, and then what?" They would try to destroy us before we could become a threat." Hayes nodded slowly. 60 years ago, humanity left Earth for the first time. We were children taking our first steps into a galaxy full of wolves. If we had shown our teeth too early, those wolves would have eaten us alive. He set down So we learned to be quiet. We learned to watch and listen. We learned everything we could about this galaxy while everyone else ignored us. "But we're not weak anymore," said. "No, we are not." Hayes smiled, and there was something in that smile that had never seen before, something patient and dangerous. "But they don't know that yet, and that is our greatest weapon." He turned back to and continued reading the reports from Earth Command. Far away in the darkness between stars, something very large waited in silence. Hundreds of ships floated in the void, their systems powered down, their crews sleeping in shifts. They had been waiting for 60 years. And they were almost ready. The alarm came on the fourth day. Morgan was eating breakfast in the small human quarters when the first siren tore through the station. It was a sound she had never heard before, a deep pulsing tone that seemed to shake the walls themselves. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside. She dropped her food and ran to the door. Commander Hayes was already there, his face serious but calm. Dr. Price stood behind him, his hands trembling slightly as he checked his. "What is it?" asked. "Long-range sensors," Price said. His voice was shaking. "They've detected a fleet coming out of the hollow." Felt her blood turn cold. Every species in the galaxy knew about the hollow. It was a region of dead space on the far edge of the known universe, a place where stars had gone dark millions of years ago. Ships that entered the hollow never returned. Entire civilizations had vanished trying to explore it. "How many ships?" Commander Hayes asked. Price looked at his and swallowed hard. "Over 300. The hallway outside their quarters was pure chaos. Were running in every direction, their insect bodies crashing into each other as they tried to reach the escape pods. In their water, tanks were rolling through the crowds, crushing anyone too slow to move. Somewhere in the distance could hear screaming. Commander Hayes led his team through the madness with steady steps. He moved like a man taking a walk through a park, not a man surrounded by panic and fear. They made their way to the main observation deck, where a large window showed the stars outside. Ambassador Al was already there. The Massive was shouting orders at his soldiers, but his yellow eyes kept moving to the window. Had never seen fear on a reptilian face before, but she saw it now. "Humans?" Al spotted them and stormed over. "What do you know about this? Is this some trick of yours?" "We know nothing, Ambassador," Hayes said calmly. "We are as surprised as you." "Surprised? Surprised?" Al grabbed Hayes by the front of his uniform and lifted him off the ground. 300 ships are coming to kill us all, and you stand there like a statue. Do your people feel nothing?" Hayes did not struggle. He simply looked into the eyes and said, "Put me down, Ambassador. We have work to do." Something in his voice made Al hesitate. After a long moment, he released Hayes and stepped back. A young officer ran up to them. "Ambassador, we have identified the ships. They are. The observation deck went silent. Even the sounds of panic from the rest of the station seemed to fade away. Had heard of everyone had. They were an ancient species, older than any civilization in the assembly. Stories said they had once ruled half the galaxy, harvesting entire worlds for food and fuel. They were monsters from the darkest legends, creatures that ate civilizations whole. Stories also said they were extinct. That is impossible, Al whispered. They have been dead for 10,000 years. Apparently not, Dr. Price said. His face was pale as he read his. The energy signatures match perfectly. It's them. Through the window, could see lights beginning to appear in the distance. They were still far away, but they were getting closer. Each light was a ship, and each ship was a nightmare. How long until they arrive? Hayes asked. 18 hours, Price answered. Al turned to his soldiers. Begin evacuation procedures. All ships will depart immediately. There isn't time, Hayes said. What? Your fastest ships need 6 hours to warm up their jump drives. In 18 hours, you might get half your fleet away, maybe less. Hayes pointed to the approaching lights. And they are harvesters. They don't let their food escape. They will chase down every ship that runs. Al stared at him. Then what do you suggest, human? We stand here and die. I suggest we fight. The words hung in the air. Saw confusion spread across the faces of every alien in the room. The stopped their clicking. The went still in their tanks. Fight, Al said. With what? The Assembly Defense Fleet has 42 ships here. 42 against 300. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You truly are insane. Commander Hayes reached into his pocket and pulled out a small communication device. It was old and worn, something he had carried for many years. He looked at it for a long moment, then pressed a button on its side. This is Commander Daniel Hayes of the Earth Delegation, he said into the device. Authorization code 77 Alpha Omega. Protocol Shepard is now active. I repeat, Protocol Shepard is active. He released the button and put the device away. His heart was pounding in her chest. She knew what those words meant. She had known about Protocol Shepard since she first joined Earth Command, though she had never believed she would hear it activated. What was that? Al demanded. Who were you talking to? Hayes turned to face him. For the first time since they had arrived at the station, he smiled. I was talking to what stands behind us, Ambassador. Al opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He simply stared at the human, trying to understand what he was seeing. Far across the galaxy, in the darkness between forgotten stars, lights began to turn on. Engines that had been cold for decades roared back to life. Crews that had trained in secret for years took their positions. Weapons systems that the assembly had never seen powered up with a low hum that grew into a thunder. The silent fleet was waking up. And it was very, very angry. The fleet arrived exactly when Dr. Price had predicted. 18 hours after the first alarm, 312 harvester ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and surrounded Nexus Prime like wolves circling a wounded animal. Morgan stood on the observation deck and felt her stomach drop. The harvester ships were unlike anything she had ever seen. They were not built from metal or any material she could recognize. They looked organic, like giant sea creatures made of black bone and dark flesh. Each one was covered in sharp spines and pulsing veins that glowed with sickly green light. The largest of them was over 10 miles long, a monster that made even the biggest warships look like toys. The Assembly Defense Fleet had formed a thin line between the station and the approaching harvesters. 42 ships, representing a dozen different species, all waiting to die. A message came through on every communication channel in the station. It was not in any known language, but somehow everyone understood it perfectly. The words seemed to crawl directly into their minds. You are harvested. That was all, 3 words. But those 3 words carried the weight of 1,000 dead civilizations. Ambassador Al stood near the window, his scales pale with fear. His soldiers had abandoned their posts. The proud war fleet was trying desperately to power up their jump drives, to escape before the slaughter began. "This is the end," Al said. His voice was hollow. "We cannot fight this. No one can fight this." Commander Hayes stood beside him, watching the approaching doom with steady eyes. "You might be surprised, Ambassador." Al turned to him with something like madness in his eyes. "Why aren't you afraid? Why aren't you running? Your tiny species has one ship here. One. When they finish with the rest of us, they will swallow your people whole." Hayes checked his watch, an old Earth device that still told time by the rotation of a planet millions of light years away. "They'll be here soon." Who will be here?" Before Hayes could answer, space itself began to break apart. Saw it happen through the observation window. Points of light appeared in the darkness, dozens of them, scattered across the void like new stars being born. But these were not stars. These were jump points, tears in the fabric of reality that allowed ships to cross impossible distances in seconds. Ships began pouring through. Not small ships, not trading vessels or exploration craft. These were warships, massive and terrible and beautiful. Their hulls were dark gray and smooth, designed not for display but for destruction. Their weapons systems glowed with blue energy, ready to fire. Their engines burned like captured suns. The first wave numbered in the hundreds. Destroyers and cruisers and frigates, moving in perfect formation. They spread out across the battlefield like a net being cast into the sea. Then came the second wave. Heavy cruisers and battleships, each one bristling with enough firepower to crack a moon in half. They took positions behind the smaller ships, their weapons already locking onto targets. Then came the carriers, massive floating fortresses that held thousands of smaller fighters in their bellies. They hung back from the front lines, ready to unleash swarms of death upon command. And then finally came the dreadnoughts. Had heard rumors about the dreadnoughts. Whispers passed between officers in dark rooms, stories that most people didn't believe. Ships so large that they had their own gravity fields. Ships armed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets with a single shot. Ships that humanity had been building in secret for 6 decades. The flagship was called the Aegis of Terra. It was over 15 miles long, larger than any of the harvesters. Its hull was covered in thousands of weapon ports, and its engines glowed with power that seemed almost divine. It moved through the jump point like a god descending from heaven. Counted the ships as they arrived, 500, 1,000, 2,000. They kept coming wave after wave until the human fleet outnumbered the 10 to 1. The observation deck was completely silent. Every alien species, every representative, every soldier and diplomat stood frozen in shock. They stared at the human armada with eyes that could not believe what they were seeing. Al's voice was barely a whisper. "This is impossible. You are the quiet ones, the weak ones. We mocked you. We spat on you." "Yes," Commander Hayes said, "you did." "Where did these ships come from? How did you build them without anyone knowing?" Hayes turned to face him. His expression was calm, almost gentle. 60 years ago, humanity discovered faster-than-light travel. We were young and excited and eager to meet other species. Then we came to the assembly, and we saw what the galaxy really was. He gestured toward the alien representatives around them. We saw powerful species crushing weaker ones. We saw empires built on slavery and conquest. We saw a galaxy where strength was the only law and kindness was considered weakness. Stepped up beside her commander. Her heart was pounding with pride. "We could have tried to compete," Hayes continued. "We could have built warships and conquered worlds and tried to be like everyone else, but we knew that would only make us targets. So instead, we chose to be quiet. We chose to seem weak. We let everyone laugh at us and mock us and ignore us." He pointed to the human fleet filling the void. "And while you were laughing, we were building. While you were mocking us, we were training. While you ignored us, we were preparing for the day when quiet strength would matter more than loud pride." A communication came through from the Aegis of Terra, a man's voice, calm and confident. "This is Admiral Peters of the United Earth Fleet. Harvesters, you have entered protected space. You will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. There will be no second warning." The harvesters did not respond. Their organic ships began to move forward, their weapons charging with green fire. Admiral Peters spoke again, this time to the assembly fleet. "All Allied vessels, hold your positions. The humans will take it from here." Watched as the human fleet began to move. Thousands of ships, all flying the flag of Earth, all ready to fight and die for a galaxy that had never shown them kindness. She looked at Commander Hayes. "Why are we doing this? They treated us like dirt. They don't deserve our help." Hayes watched the fleet advance. "Maybe not, but that's not why we help people, Lieutenant. We help people because of who we are, not because of who they are." The first shots were fired. The battle for the galaxy had begun. Admiral Peters stood on the bridge of the Aegis of Terra and watched the battle unfold on the massive display screen in front of him. He was a thin man with sharp eyes and hands that never shook. He had trained for this moment his entire life. Every officer in the human fleet had. "First wave engage," he said calmly. 400 human destroyers surged forward. They moved in perfect formation, their pilots connected through neural links that allowed them to think and react as one. The harvesters fired their green energy weapons, burning holes through space itself, but the human ships were too fast and too coordinated. The destroyers returned fire with kinetic accelerators, weapons that launched metal slugs at nearly the speed of light. The slugs tore through the organic hulls of the harvesters like bullets through flesh. Green blood sprayed into the void as the first enemy ships began to die. "Second wave, provide support," Peters ordered. The cruisers and battleships opened fire with plasma lances, beams of superheated matter that could melt through any armor. The beams cut across the battlefield in bright blue lines, slicing harvesters in half and setting their organic systems on fire. On the observation deck of Nexus Prime, Morgan watched the battle with wide eyes. She had seen combat simulations before. She had trained in virtual battles and studied tactics from old Earth wars, but nothing had prepared her for the real thing. The scale was beyond anything she could have imagined. Thousands of ships filled the void, firing and dodging and exploding. The darkness of space was lit up with weapons fire in every color: blue from human plasma lances, green from energy weapons, orange from explosions that consumed entire vessels. Human ships were dying. Could see them on the tactical display, their signals going dark one by one. Each signal represented a ship. Each ship held hundreds of crew members, hundreds of humans who would never go home. "We're taking heavy losses," Dr. Price said. His voice was tight with worry. "The weapons are more powerful than expected." Commander Hayes nodded but said nothing. His eyes never left the battle. They were fighting back with terrible fury. Their largest ship, the 15-mile harvester at the center of their formation, opened what looked like a mouth and released a beam of pure destruction. The beam swept across space and caught 3 human battleships in its path. All 3 were vaporized instantly. But for every human ship destroyed, 20 harvesters died. The human pilots were simply too good, too fast, too coordinated. They danced through the enemy formation like ghosts, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before the harvesters could respond. "Carrier groups, launch fighters," Admiral Peters commanded. The massive carriers opened their hangar bays, and thousands of small fighter craft poured out like angry hornets. Each fighter was piloted by a human with years of training and a neural link that made their ship an extension of their own body. They swarmed the harvesters, targeting weak points in sensor clusters and weapon systems. The battle raged for 3 hours. On Nexus Prime received a message from Commander Hayes. "Lieutenant, we have a problem. Boarding parties have breached the station. I need you to lead our Marines to repel them." Felt fear grip her heart, but she pushed it down. "Yes, sir." She gathered the human security team, Victor and Ben, along with a squad of 12 Marines who had been waiting in the human quarters. They were all armed with standard Earth combat rifles and wore light armor designed for fighting in tight spaces. They had breached the station in 3 places. Took her team to the closest breach, near the medical center where wounded aliens from the assembly fleet were being treated. She heard the creatures before she saw them. A wet, clicking sound like bones being ground together. Then the smell hit her, a rotting stench that made her eyes water. The soldiers were nightmares made flesh. They walked on 4 legs like insects, but their upper bodies were almost humanoid, with long arms ending in sharp claws. Their faces were covered in smaller eyes, dozens of them, all glowing with that sickly green light. They did not wear armor or carry weapons. They did not need to. Their bodies were weapons. "Open fire," shouted. The Marines fired their rifles, and the hallway exploded with light and sound. The charge through the gunfire, some of them falling, others pushing forward despite their wounds. They were fast, faster than anything that size should be able to move. One of them reached Victor and slashed with its claws. Victor dodged the first strike but caught the second across his chest. He fell back, bleeding badly. Kept firing. She aimed for the eyes, the only weak point she could see. A soldier fell at her feet, half its face burned away by her rifle. Another took its place immediately. The fighting was brutal and close. Took a claw across her shoulder that cut through her armor and into her flesh. The pain was incredible, but she did not stop. She could not stop. People were counting on her. Ben threw a grenade into a cluster of soldiers. The explosion scattered them, giving the Marines a moment to regroup. Used that moment to pull Victor to safety. "We can't hold them," one of the Marines shouted. "We hold them or people die," shouted back. "Keep firing." They held. For 20 minutes they held that hallway against wave after wave of soldiers. When the last creature finally fell, stood over its body and tried to catch her breath. Her shoulder was burning with pain. Her rifle was nearly out of charge. Around her, half the Marine squad was wounded or dead. A diplomat approached her. He was shaking inside his water tank, his tentacles pressed against the glass. You saved us. Why? We treated your people so poorly. We laughed at you." Wiped green blood from her face with her good arm. "Because that's what humans do. We protect people, even the ones who don't deserve it." They stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he bowed his head in a gesture of respect. Outside, the battle was reaching its end. The human fleet had destroyed over 250 harvesters. The remaining enemy ships tried to retreat, but the human destroyers cut off their escape routes. One by one, the harvesters were hunted down and destroyed. Admiral Peters watched the last enemy signal disappear from his display. "All hostile vessels eliminated," he said quietly. Then he closed his eyes and thought about the 112 human ships that would never return home. The battle was over. Humanity had won. But the cost had been higher than anyone wanted to count. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. 3 days had passed since the battle. The fleet was gone, destroyed completely by the human armada. The bodies of fallen harvesters still floated in the void outside, slowly drifting away into the darkness. Rescue ships moved between the debris, searching for survivors from both human and assembly vessels. The cost of victory was heavy. 112 human ships had been destroyed. Over 8,000 crew members had died. Their names were being carved into monuments back on Earth, heroes who gave their lives to save a galaxy that had never shown them kindness. Now the assembly had gathered again, but everything was different. The human delegation no longer stood in the back corner. Commander Hayes and Lieutenant Morgan sat at the head of the great table, in seats that had been reserved for the most powerful species in the galaxy. His arm was in a sling, her shoulder wound still healing, but she sat straight and proud. The other species watched the humans with new eyes. The mockery was gone. The laughter was silent. In its place was something that looked very much like fear. Ambassador Al was the first to speak. The Great walked slowly to where Commander Hayes sat and lowered his massive head. It was a gesture of respect that his species almost never offered to outsiders. "I owe you an apology," Al said. His voice was softer than had ever heard it. "I mocked your people, I called you vermin, I treated you with nothing but contempt." He paused, struggling with words that did not come easily. "And when the darkness came, you saved us. You bled for us. You died for us." Hayes looked up at the towering reptile. His face showed no anger, no satisfaction, no pride, just calm understanding. "We are not angry, Ambassador," Hayes said. "We never were." "But why?" Al asked. "We gave you every reason to hate us. We gave you every reason to let us burn. Why did you fight for us?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. 60 years ago, humanity was young and alone in a very dangerous galaxy. We had two choices. We could become like everyone else. We could build empires and conquer worlds and crush anyone weaker than us. That would have made us strong in the way you understand strength. He stood up from his chair and walked to the great window that looked out over the stars. But we chose a different path. We chose to be patient. We chose to build our strength in secret, not to conquer, but to protect. We wanted to be ready to help when help was needed. Watched her commander speak. She had served under him for 5 years, but she had never understood him as well as she did in this moment. "You ask why we saved you," Hayes continued. "The answer is simple, because that is who we are. Humans protect people, not because those people deserve it, not because we expect thanks or reward. We protect people because we believe that is what strength should be used for." He turned back to face the assembly. "We could have conquered this galaxy. We could have destroyed every species that mocked us and taken everything for ourselves. Our fleet is strong enough. Our weapons are powerful enough. But that would have made us no different from that would have made us the monsters." Silence filled the hall. The representatives of 40 species sat frozen, processing words they had never expected to hear. A diplomat rose from her seat. Her voice clicked softly as she spoke. "We have voted, Commander Hayes, unanimously. Humanity is hereby granted a permanent seat on the High Council of the Galactic Assembly. Your species will have equal voice in all decisions that affect our future. Furthermore," she continued, "the Assembly formally apologizes for the treatment your people have endured. We were blind. We were foolish. We judged you by the standards of a galaxy built on violence and conquest, and we failed to see what you truly were." Hayes nodded slowly. "We accept the seat, and we accept the apology, but we do not need either one. We did not save you for power or position. We saved you because it was the right thing to do." After the ceremony, walked with Commander Hayes through the corridors of Nexus Prime. The station was slowly returning to normal, though suspected nothing would ever truly be normal again. Every alien they passed stopped and bowed their heads to the humans. Some whispered words of thanks. Others simply stared with eyes full of wonder. "Do you think they really respect us now?" asked. "Or are they just afraid of our fleet?" Hayes smiled. "Fear and respect are different things, Lieutenant. Fear fades when the danger is gone. Respect takes much longer to build." He paused near a window and looked out at the stars. "But I think this is a start. I think we showed them something today that they've never seen before." "What's that?" "A species that is strong enough to destroy everything but chooses to protect instead." He turned to look at her. "That is rare in this galaxy, perhaps rare in any galaxy, and it makes people think. It makes them wonder if maybe there is a better way to exist among the stars. Followed his gaze out the window. In the distance, she could see the human fleet preparing to depart. Thousands of ships, the greatest armada the galaxy had ever seen, returning to their hidden stations and secret bases. They would disappear again, becoming ghosts in the darkness, waiting until they were needed once more. "What happens now?" asked. "Now we go home," Hayes said. "We rebuild, we train new crews, we make our fleet even stronger." He put a hand on her good shoulder. "And we wait, because someday, somewhere, someone will need us again, and when that day comes, we will be ready." They walked toward the docking bay where their ship was waiting. Behind them, the assembly continued to talk and plan and argue about the future, but everything had changed. The quiet humans had shown the galaxy what stood behind them. Not just ships and weapons and soldiers, something deeper, something more powerful. A civilization that believed in protecting the weak. A species that refused to become the monsters they fought. A people who proved that true strength was not about destruction, but about the courage to stand in front of those who could not stand for themselves. Far across the void, the silent fleet vanished into the darkness between stars. They left no trace, no trail, no evidence of their passing. Just a galaxy that would never look at humans the same way again. Let them remember, thought as she boarded her ship. Let them remember what they saw today. Let them remember what stands behind the quiet ones.